Welcome, you're on the right channel. The day Adeola was born, the wind refused to blow. The air in Ayatoro Kingdom stood still, thick with tension. The once vibrant palace was silent, cloaked in fear. A dethronement was underway. Betrayal had eaten into the royal family like termites in dry wood, and a coup backed by jealous relatives and political enemies had turned Adela's birthright into a forgotten prophecy. Her mother, Queen Mornike, had fled that very night. Wrapped in rags and pain, she left the palace with nothing but her unborn child and the whispers of the midwives who helped her escape. "Your child is special," one of them had said. "She is born with a mantle of glory, but the world will not know until the right time. Hide her, or she will be lost forever." Mornike found refuge in a quiet village hundreds of miles away. There, she raised Adeola like every other child. No royal robes, no golden anklets, no throne. Just simplicity. But the girl was different. She spoke late, but when she did, her voice was like music. She often sat alone, staring into the sky, humming songs no one taught her. The village elders said she carried an ancient light. She was kind, modest, and spiritual. She prayed like an old soul, and her heart felt things deeply. By the time she turned 18, her mother had passed on from a mysterious illness. On her deathbed, Mornike pressed a sealed letter into her daughter's hand. "When the time is right, open this. Not before. You are more than you know, Adeola." But Adeola couldn't bear to open the letter, not yet. She locked it in her Bible and focused on survival. She secured admission into university and worked odd jobs to pay her fees. Her intelligence carried her through school with grace, and by the time she graduated, she had no family left, just dreams. She moved to Lagos to begin a new life, still unaware of the royalty in her blood. Lagos was loud and fast, but Adeola had always moved at her own pace. She found work at a promising networking company, where her calm spirit and dedication quickly drew attention. In her first week, she met him, Bola. He wasn't just good looking. Bola had presence. The kind of man who wore custom suits, drove sleek cars, and made women laugh effortlessly. When he walked into a room, heads turned. But it wasn't just his charm. It was the way he seemed to know everything. He complimented Adeola often, her work, her modest dress, her smile. At first, she thought it was just friendly admiration. Then came the lunch offers, the gifts, the late-night messages. Bola was relentless but respectful. "You're different," he told her. "You're not like the others." Adela's colleagues whispered, "Don't fall for him. He's dangerous," one warned. He was married once. Left the woman just like that. Rumor is he used charms. Adeola didn't believe in office gossip. But her spirit? It wouldn't rest. So, she did what she had always done when things seemed too good to be true. She prayed. And then she began to investigate. It took weeks. She found an old friend of Bola's ex-wife who confirmed the rumors. Bola had indeed married a woman in his hometown, and within a year, he had divorced her. No fight, no scandal, just a sudden coldness and legal papers. The woman had never recovered emotionally. She still spoke of Bola as if she were under a spell. Adeola confronted him, her eyes firm. "Why did your marriage end?" He blinked, caught off guard. It wasn't working. Or was it never real, she asked. He sighed. "You've been listening to jealous people. Even if the rumors aren't true," she said, "a man who walks away from love like that can never hold my heart." And just like that, Adeola walked away. But love had other plans for her, plans hiding in the shadows. One man had loved Adeola in silence for years, a colleague she barely noticed, Ogunmola. He was gentle, soft-spoken, and not the type women swooned over at first glance. He came to work early, left late, and always had kind words for everyone. He wasn't rich, far from it, but his heart was solid gold. While others fought to be noticed, Ogunmola stood back and admired Adeola quietly. He knew she was different, not because of her beauty or intelligence, but because he saw a glow in her that others ignored. A spiritual depth, a destiny. He waited patiently. One day, he found her crying quietly in the office stairwell. Her mother's birthday had just passed, and the pain was fresh. "I know what it feels like to lose someone," he said gently. She looked at him for the first time. Not just looked, but saw him. And from that day on, something shifted. Adeola walked away from a charming but deceitful man. But someone else had been watching her all along. After that day in the stairwell, Ogunmola and Adeola grew close. Slowly, naturally. They began to eat lunch together at work, sharing laughter and memories. Ogunmola was not flashy like Bola. He didn't show up in luxury cars or shower her with expensive gifts, but he gave her his time, his attention, his prayers, and most of all, his respect. When Ogunmola finally proposed, it wasn't under the glow of candlelight or at a fancy restaurant. It was in the company car, parked under a mango tree after a long day. He held her hand and said simply, "Adeola, I may not have riches, but I have peace. I've loved you from afar for too long. Will you let me love you up close for life?" She was quiet for a long time. Then tears filled her eyes. Yes, they married in a modest ceremony, far away from Lagos noise and pressure. There were no camera crews or silk gowns, just smiles, dancing, prayers, and the sound of drums in the village square. Adeola was at peace, or so she thought. A year into their marriage, things began to shift. Ogunmola started acting strange. It began with subtle things. He avoided certain calls. He would switch off his phone when his father's brother, Uncle Fagbamila, tried to reach him. And whenever he returned from his village, he came back distant, restless, quiet, moody. "Adeola, don't worry yourself," he said once, catching her watching him. "It's just family matters." But one day, while they were out shopping, Adeola bumped into an old friend from school, Doyen. Doyen looked tired, her once vibrant eyes now clouded with sadness. They exchanged pleasantries, then sat at a nearby cafe to catch up. "How's marriage life treating you?" Adeola asked cheerfully. Doyen's smile faded. "I'm alive. That's what matters." She looked around, leaned forward, and whispered, "My husband took me to his father's brother to do a charm love potion. He said it would make me stay faithful forever. But it's more like a prison." Adeola froze. "Love potion?" "Yes, and I found out too late. The man behind it is a powerful herbalist. They say his spells bind the soul. That man is Ogunmola's uncle." The world tilted under Adeola's feet. She returned home that night shaken. She sat Ogunmola down and asked plainly, "Is that why you always avoid his calls? Why you always come back disturbed after visiting the village?" Ogunmola said nothing for a while. Then finally, yes, because men like him can destroy families. His powers are dangerous. I've been trying to distance myself. She nodded slowly. "But you've never..." "No," he said quickly. "Not with us." She wanted to believe him. Needed to. But a part of her, buried deep in the space her mother once filled, whispered, "Pray. Ask God to open your eyes." So Adeola prayed. That same week, she noticed her younger sister Ronk acting oddly. Ronk had come to stay with them briefly while job hunting in Lagos. At first, it was cheerful. But soon, Adeola noticed how often she laughed with Ogunmola in the kitchen. How their conversations lasted longer than necessary. How her sister's phone always lit up with a message from M. Then one night, Adeola overheard laughter from the living room. She walked in to find Ronk giggling at something on Ogunmola's phone. They both froze when they saw her. The room went silent. A heavy air of betrayal hung between them. Adeola didn't speak that night. She just went to the bedroom, locked the door, and wept. The pain wasn't just about jealousy, it was about betrayal. Family. Trust. The next morning, Ronk packed her bags without saying goodbye. A week later, Ogunmola came home from work looking pale, dizzy. He collapsed before he could say a word. By the time they rushed him to the hospital, he was dead. Just like that. No illness, no accident, no warning. The village called. Ogunmola's uncle was wailing, crying, begging to speak to Adeola. She refused at first, but something told her to listen. So she traveled back to the village, the same place where she had been rejected, mocked for being a city girl. There, in the front yard of the family house, Uncle Fagbamila knelt in the dirt, sobbing. "Forgive me, Adeola. I destroyed everything." He confessed it all. He had indeed made a love charm for Ogunmola on the very week he proposed to her. Ogunmola had refused at first, but after much pressure and prophetic promises of wealth tied to Adela's presence, he caved. "But you loved him anyway," the uncle said, weeping. "Your heart was pure, and when the charm began to fade, your love remained. But I grew greedy. I told him to marry your sister too. I said she was glorious like you. That 2 glorious women would make him a king. He refused at first, then agreed. But the charm turned on him. It never works when used against true love." Adeola stood, silent. The wind that had once stood still at her birth now rushed around her, loud in her ears, whispering, "You were never just a wife. You are royalty." The moment she stepped out of that compound, something shifted in the spiritual. Her past had found her. Her destiny was waiting. She went back home and opened the old Bible where her mother's letter was hidden. She unfolded the brittle paper and read the truth. Recognized her mother's handwriting instantly. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it and began to read. "My dearest Adeola, if you are reading this, it means your destiny is calling. I pray your heart is ready. You were not born to live among commoners, my child. You are the blood of Oba Ayatund, king of the 7 rivers. The prophecy at your birth said you would bring healing to women and restore a broken lineage. But after your father died, jealousy and betrayal forced me to flee. You were only a baby. I raised you far away to protect you from those who wanted you silenced. But you must return when your heart begins to ache with questions no one else can answer. Return to Alafin Oro. Return to your crown. Your name is not just Adeola, it is Adeola Ayatund, daughter of the king, priestess of healing. Your journey will not be easy, but trust God. Even when the wind is silent, he is still speaking. Love always. Mama." Tears spilled down Adela's cheeks. She sat still for hours as if rooted in time. The letter was not just a message, it was a key, a map, a prophecy fulfilled. She finally understood the unrest in her soul, the strange dream she had growing up, the voice that always whispered prayers when she couldn't sleep, the strength that came over her when she prayed for others and saw results they couldn't explain. She wasn't ordinary, and it was time to stop living like she was. That same week, Adeola resigned from her job. Her colleagues were shocked, especially her HR manager, who pleaded with her to reconsider. "I'm going to the village," she said simply. "What will you do there?" someone asked. "I'm going to remember who I am." She traveled to Alafin Oro, the village her mother had once spoken of in hushed tones. It was deep in Oyo State, surrounded by rivers and ancient trees. The air was different there. It felt like something was waiting for her. At the entrance of the village, a frail old woman stood waiting with a staff. She wore white from head to toe. "You have come," the woman said softly. "The wind told us." Adeola stared. "How do you know who I am?" The woman smiled. "Your mother and I were sisters in spirit. She sent word through the earth before she passed. The land remembers." She took Adela's hand and led her to a compound behind the village square. The air was filled with scent of herbs, incense, and aged wisdom. Over the next few days, Adeola learned everything about her royal bloodline, about her grandfather the late king, and most importantly, about the healing power passed through her lineage. "You were born with a sacred fire," the old woman said. "That is why dark forces tried to steal your joy. Ogunmola's uncle saw it. That's why he bound you. but love has set you free. One night, as the moon hung low and full, Adeola had a dream. She stood by a river, dressed in white, and dozens of women approached her, some pregnant, some weeping, some with barren wombs. As each one touched her garment, they fell to their knees and began to sing. Their stomachs grew full. Their faces glowed. She woke up breathless. That morning, the old woman handed her a staff carved with the symbols of their ancestors. "You are ready." Word began to spread. At first, it was one woman, barren for 9 years, who came and left pregnant. Then another and another. They came from cities, towns, other villages. Adeola never took money. She only asked them to pray with sincerity and believe. Within a year, the once quiet compound in Alafin Oro had become a haven for women seeking healing, hope, and divine help. Adeola walked among them with grace. She taught them, prayed for them, anointed them, and reminded them that they were not forgotten. And she smiled again, truly, deeply. The girl who had once wept in the shadows of Lagos now stood in the light of purpose. One evening, as she sat with the children she had adopted, many of whom were orphans brought by the women she had helped, Adeola looked at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Mama. I found the crown, and I will never let it fall again." A year had passed in peace. Adeola had found rhythm in her new life, waking up before the sun, praying beneath the Irako tree, and attending to the women who arrived daily with whispered fears and hopeful eyes. They called her Ayanawara, Mother of Gold. She had grown into her role. Her voice carried power. Her hands brought comfort. Her children, 7 in number now, each adopted through the journey, called her Mama Ade. Life was rich, full of meaning, but something strange was coming. She could feel it. It started with a dream. In the dream, fire chased her across a mountain. The trees burned behind her, the river boiled, and a man wearing white beads and black ash laughed from the top of a rocky cliff. "You think you've escaped, daughter of the crown," he called out. "Your blood speaks louder than your prayers." She woke in sweat. And the next day, the first sign arrived. A woman named Kemi arrived at the gate, her hair unkempt, her wrapper torn. Her eyes darted like hunted prey. "They're following me," she whispered. "Who?" Adeola asked. "My husband's people. They said I was the reason his business failed, that I carry a curse." Adeola took her hand gently. "You are safe here. You carry light, not a curse." But even as she said it, the trees behind the compound rustled unnaturally. By the next week, strange occurrences began. The Irako tree behind her house, a tree that had never shed leaves, began to weep sap like blood. Children complained of whispers in the night, voices calling their names from the bush. One afternoon, as Adeola prayed with a pregnant woman, she felt a sharp sting on her neck. When she looked down, a scorpion had crawled into her wrapper. It was black, and it vanished the moment she tried to show someone. She knew what it meant. The spirits from Ogunmola's family were angry. They had tried to bind her destiny to feed their own hunger. And now that she had broken free and begun to rise, they had returned with vengeance. Late one night, as rain fell hard upon the compound, a stranger knocked at the gate. A boy ran to get Adeola. She opened the gate herself. It was Ogunmola's uncle, but he looked nothing like the proud man who once schemed behind her back. His eyes were sunken, his frame bony, his hands shaking. "Forgive me," he begged, falling at her feet. She said nothing. He continued, voice cracking. "Ever since my nephew died, they've turned on me. His father's shrine caught fire without cause. The river behind my house turned black. They said it was because I tampered with your destiny. Please lift the curse." Adeola stared at him, not with hate, but pity. "I never cursed you," she said softly, "but the one who digs a grave for another often falls into it." He wailed, but she asked the children to bring him water. She instructed him to fast for 3 days and confess everything to the village elders. Then she prayed for his release, not from her anger, but from his own guilt. Still, she knew the real battle had just begun. 2 nights later, she woke up with a scream. Her eldest adopted child, Adironk, had vanished from the house. They searched everywhere. The villagers formed a torchlit search party. They found her at the foot of the river, unconscious, clutching a calabash with strange markings. Someone had tried to use her for a ritual. Adeola fell to her knees. No more. She returned to her hut, lit 7 candles, and brought out the staff of Ayatund, the sacred symbol of her lineage. She stood at the village square, rain soaking her wrapper, thunder groaning in the sky. "I call on the covenant of my fathers," she declared. "I speak as daughter of Oba Ayatund, born of prophecy, anointed for healing. Let every tongue that speaks against me be silenced. Let every eye that spies on me go blind." Lightning split the sky. The villagers, drawn by her cry, gathered. Some knelt, some cried, others whispered, "She carries the power." The fire that had chased her in the dream had now arrived. But it was not to destroy her. It had come to cleanse. That night, she anointed every child, every woman, every tree in her compound, and when she slept, the dream returned. But this time, she stood on the mountain, and the fire obeyed her. The man with the black ash screamed and vanished in smoke. The trees stopped burning, and in the sky, her mother appeared, smiling. "You have become what I always knew you were meant to be." By dawn, the air around the village was different. The whispers stopped. No more bleeding trees. No more scorpions. No more hauntings. The curse had lifted. But Adeola knew her journey was not over. This was just the fire that revealed the gold. She had conquered her enemies. Now it was time to build something eternal. Adeola has confronted the hidden darkness behind her husband's death and embraced her identity as a royal-born healer. After a spiritual battle that nearly cost her a child, she calls on her divine heritage to break every curse. But as peace returns, a new mystery begins to stir beneath the surface, one that leads her to a secret buried deep in her own bloodline. The rains had stopped and the skies turned gentler. But in the quiet moments of dawn, Adeola began to feel something stir within her, something deeper than fear, more persistent than grief. A presence, a whisper. It began when she held a woman in labor, a woman named Amok who had walked 5 villages with swollen feet, seeking Adeola's help. During the birth, Adeola closed her eyes to pray as she always did. But this time, a vision crashed through her mind like a flood. She saw her mother, standing at the edge of a golden stream, dressed in royal blue, smiling. But beside her stood a child, not Adeola, but someone with her eyes. A girl. Then the vision changed. The girl screamed, bound by chains, dragged into a dark shrine. A woman, hooded, faceless, watched from the shadows. The woman looked familiar. When Adeola opened her eyes, the baby had been born, but her heart thudded in panic. That night, she couldn't sleep. She walked barefoot into the forest, guided by nothing but her instincts. Deeper and deeper she went, until she reached the old shrine where her grandfather had once made sacrifices. She had not stepped here in over a decade. Now it called to her. Inside the shrine, hidden beneath a cracked stone, she found it an old diary. It belonged to her mother. She trembled as she opened the dusty pages. "I was warned not to tell Adeola the truth. But how long can a woman bury the past and expect it not to grow roots? Her twin, yes, her twin is alive, taken the night of their birth, stolen by those who feared the prophecy of the 2 sons, one to heal, one to rule. I weep every night. Forgive me, Adeola." The words dropped like stones in Adeola's soul. She had a twin, a sister, taken at birth? Suddenly, memories she had long buried began to surface. Visions, dreams, the strange way she sometimes felt like a piece of her was missing. The way her soul sometimes echoed when she prayed. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she packed a small bag, left instructions for her children, and set out before sunrise. She didn't know where she was going, but her spirit did. She traveled east to the ancient hills of Iboewan, guided by only one clue. Her mother had mentioned the Temple of the Two Suns. On the third day, she reached a small village. The elders received her with awe. "You are the one," an old woman said, bowing before her. "The sun has returned." "Do you know who I am?" Adeola asked. The woman pointed toward the hills. "Not who you are, but who you must find." At the top of the hill stood a woman who looked exactly like Adeola. Same eyes, same voice, same beauty, the same scar on her wrist, a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon. They stared at each other in silence. Tears fell freely. I don't understand," Adeola whispered. "I've seen you in my dreams since I was 10, the woman replied. "I thought I was cursed. I thought I was alone," Adeola said, stepping closer. They embraced, one heart in two bodies, one destiny split by betrayal. Her name was Anaik, raised in secrecy by priestesses who believed the prophecy was dangerous. Anaik had been hidden from the world, but she had always felt something missing, something incomplete. They spent hours talking, comparing childhood stories, visions, longings, like pieces of the same puzzle finally reunited. But the reunion brought more questions. Why were they separated? Who had taken Anaik? And most importantly, what prophecy? That night, the high priestess of Iboewan revealed the truth. There was a vision at your birth. The two of you, sun and moon, healers and rulers. One would rise to awaken the barren earth. The other would open the gates of justice. But the elders feared power in female hands. So they lied. They separated you, hid one, ignored the other. But prophecy doesn't fade. It waits. Adela's heart thundered. Her life had been shaped by pain, betrayal, and spiritual war. And now, she stood on the edge of a new mystery. Her destiny was not hers alone. She and Anaik were meant to rise together. But at what cost? As they stood under the moon that night, holding hands, a sudden wind swept through the village. The priestess shouted, "It has begun!" Lightning cracked. Far in the distance, a royal drumbeat echoed from the mountains. Someone had discovered the twins' reunion. Someone who would stop at nothing to destroy what was meant to be whole. Adeola turned to Anaik. "Are you ready?" Anaik smiled. "I've been ready all my life." They knew war was coming. Adeola discovered that she was not alone. She had a twin sister, Anaik, stolen from her at birth because of a prophecy that foretold the rise of two powerful women. Now reunited, the sisters prepared to confront the darkness that tried to bury their destiny. But the forces that tore them apart are not finished. A final battle is coming, one that will demand every ounce of strength, love, and light. The night before the coronation, the stars burned brighter than ever. The village of Iboewan had not seen such gathering in decades. From distant lands, messengers, elders, midwives, and former queens arrived, many claiming they had dreamt of two radiant daughters standing under a fiery sky. It was the prophecy unfolding. But beneath the celebration, fear stirred like a snake in the grass. The old rulers, those who once exiled the twin sons, were watching. One of them still held the dark book of oaths that had sealed Anaik's fate years ago. He was known as Olori Iku, the Shadow King, a former priest who dabbled in forbidden magic and feared nothing more than women rising in divine power. He sent his sons to intercept the ceremony. Their orders were simple: stop the coronation by any means necessary. On the day of the ceremony, Adeola and Anaik were dressed in white, gold, and crimson. Their hair was adorned with cowries and feathers of the royal eagle. Each step they took toward the sacred circle caused the earth to tremble, not with fear, but with recognition. Drums roared. Children danced. But then, screams pierced the air. Men in black stormed the village. They carried staffs carved with cursed runes, eyes wild with bloodlust. The villagers scattered. Flames erupted from thrown charms. Chaos broke the circle. Adeola grabbed her sister's hand and ran. Behind them, 3 attackers chased. Suddenly, Enike stopped and turned. Her eyes burned with the fire of ancient spirits. She raised her hand and screamed a chant. A wall of wind blasted the attackers backward, knocking them unconscious. Adeola stared at her in awe. "Where did you learn that?" Enike smiled. "They taught me. The priestesses. But I never used it until now." They ran toward the temple, dodging chaos. At the temple gates, Olori Iku himself appeared. Dressed in black robes and a crown of thorns, he pointed his staff at them. "You were never meant to rise," he bellowed. "The world is not ready for the womb to rule." Adeola stepped forward, her voice firm. "The world was never yours to own." He lifted his staff, calling lightning. Adeola lifted her hands, whispering a prayer her mother once sang. The lightning struck and split. Half of it scorched the temple steps. The other half turned to golden light and circled the twins like a halo. The people gasped. Even the enemy soldiers trembled. At that moment, the high priestess raised her voice. "The 2 sons have awakened." The villagers began to sing. The dark soldiers dropped their weapons. Even Olori Iku began to back away. But before he could escape, a sudden force struck him down. It was not a blade, nor a hand, but the judgment of the ancestors. His body withered. The book of curses burned in his hand, and peace returned. 3 days later, in a gathering never before seen in the land, Adeola and Enike were crowned, not just as healers or leaders, but as queens of light. Not by bloodline alone, but by purpose fulfilled. The twins stood side by side, tears on their cheeks, the prophecy complete. "I never thought I would be more than a housewife," Adeola whispered. "But now I see. I was born to rebuild broken women. And I," Enike said, holding her hand, "was born to protect them." Days later, Adeola and Enike were crowned under the sacred Irako tree. Their crowns were made of woven light, cast by the flames of truth, not just as queens, but as healers, mothers, builders of destiny. Years passed. Adeola built a sanctuary for women, those who had been betrayed, broken, and silenced. Her children grew in truth and power. And every year on the day of twin sons, the people danced in honor of the queen who once lived as a commoner. Adeola, the hidden crown. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that awaken the soul. Until next time, may your light never be hidden.